Today we're going to build the Back Off Shelving system, designed by Christopher Deam. We're going to be building this whole project out of 2 sheets of 3/4 inch Baltic birch plywood, 2 pieces of 78 inch double slotted shelving standard, and 8 shelf supports. A lot of the plywood pieces are going to be laminated together to make them into 1.5 inch thick pieces. So I started by breaking down my first sheet of plywood into oversized versions of what would become the shelves, so that I could glue them up and then trim them to their final dimensions a little bit later. Now, admittedly, I'm not that great at following building instructions. In fact, I've never done it before, unless it was a plan that I made myself. So already right here, I'm messing up a little bit. I should have actually made the shelves out of 4 pieces instead of 2. Like this, so that when the whole thing comes together, those gaps would conceal the shelf supports. I didn't realize this until it was too late though. Next, I continued breaking down the plywood into the rest of the pieces that I need to complete the box and the frame that's going to hold everything together. With everything cut down to a manageable size, next I ripped 4 long strips that'll become the vertical portion of the frame. We'll come back to those in a bit. And I also cut the pieces that'll become the horizontal part that attaches to the wall. By this time, the shelf pieces that I had laminated together in the beginning were dry enough that I could trim them to their final size. You'll notice here that there are 3 that are 1.5 inches thick and 2 that are only 3/4 of an inch thick. That's because those 2 are going to be the top and bottom of a box that requires a different construction method. Speaking of the box, in this drawing you can see how it'll be formed by creating rabbets due to the fact that the outside pieces are all longer than the inside pieces by 1.5 inches, or the thickness of 2 pieces of plywood. This makes for a really strong joint, and in my opinion a really cool looking one thanks to all the plywood layers. So with all the pieces cut, I started assembling. First I laminated the inside bottom to the outside bottom pieces, leaving 3/4 of an inch on either side. Next I attached the 2 outside side pieces. You can see I used a couple screws on the underside here, but those won't ever be visible, unless you're reviewing it from the ground for some reason. From there, I laminated on the 2 inside side pieces, followed by the inside top piece. And last but not least, the outside top piece. The only other thing to note here is that the 2 inside side pieces are 3/4 of an inch shorter than the rest of the pieces. That's so when the whole thing came together, there'd be a pocket that I could install a back panel into. And that's what you see me cutting and fitting in this shot. Once that was fit, but before I called it a night, I brought the back panel inside to put a coat of this greenish yellowish paint on. And then I did a second coat in the morning. I know it doesn't really look great here, but when the whole thing is assembled, it really adds character to the piece. Back out in the shop the next day, I set my saw blade to the depth of the shelving standard. Then I set my fence and took a pass on the edge of either of the vertical frame pieces. These are the recesses that the shelving standard is going to fit into. Once I verified that they were cut in the right location, I turned them on their faces and made another pass to clear out all of the material. And finally, before gluing anything together, I took some scrap pieces and filled back in the ends of the long pieces here. And then I glued them together to make the final shape that I was going to need. Once those were dry, I could install the shelving stander, which is just a matter of driving a few screws. Next, I turned my attention to the horizontal pieces that'll form a right angle with the vertical pieces. You can see in this shot that one side is longer than the other, and the same is true for the vertical pieces. This is going to form a half lap that's going to make for a stronger joint. Next, I assembled those pieces. You can see here I also added back a little spacer block to fill up the negative space that was cut for the metal but not used. You never really see this, but it just gives a little bit more wood for the joint to bond. Once they were dry enough, I added a couple screws to either joint from the inside to make it a little bit sturdier. After a little cleanup, the last thing that I did was attach this piece that ties the 2 assemblies together in the back, and that you can use to anchor to the wall. I personally think that this part of the design still needs a little bit of work. Perhaps it could be doubled up to make it a bit stronger. I'm probably particularly cautious about this because I live in Southern California where we're prone to earthquakes, but, well, I guess that's what prototypes are for. And that's what this is. Finally, I took the whole thing inside of my house and assembled it. For more information, click on the links in the description box below. Be sure to check out our Instagram to see what we're working on next, and make sure you've subscribed to this channel if you haven't already. I'm Chris from Foureyes Furniture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.